Hi everyone, hope you're all well. So today I'll just be going through how to complain effectively. I'll be discussing what remedies you have to complain about a decision and also how to take that forward and next steps. So I'll just share my screen with you all. Okay. So yeah, my name's Priya and I've worked as a freelance advisor in community care matters for Carers UK since 2020. So my role mainly involves advising individuals and services on community care rights and how to challenge decisions made by local authorities. Outside of my role with Carers UK, I'm a solicitor for another charity specialising in community care and housing law. So what we're going to be covering today is what can you complain about, the remedies that are available to you, how do you complain and what points should you be covering, what evidence and documents should you be including in your complaints. You may be considering legal action, so you might be wondering how should you prepare for that and how can you access that. You might also be wondering what support is available to help you make these complaints. And I've also provided an example complaint later on in the presentation, which you are welcome to use should you need to. So firstly, you can complain about basically anything which you feel is an unfair decision or process, or you may want to complain about how you've been treated or how your loved ones have been treated, or perhaps about a policy as well, which provides a disadvantage to yourself or somebody that you care for. So when it comes to things like care and support, you might find throughout that process that some of the decisions that have been made have not been made properly. Maybe the evidence that you've given the local authority have not been properly considered. Maybe they've not even read it and that's very apparent to you. Perhaps when you've received your care assessment or your carer's assessment, the content in that is not right, depending on what was discussed. Or maybe the social worker or another staff member was not professional or appropriate in their conduct towards you or the person that you provide care for. So you can complain about things like that. As many of you may be carers, you may want to complain about a delay in being offered a carer's assessment. Maybe you've not been offered one at all. You might want to complain about the lack of support and respite following a carer's assessment. Or maybe there's poor communication from the social worker that's allocated to you or the person you provide care for. Local authorities have many policies in their services that they provide. So it might be that the local authority or the NHS has a policy which puts you at a disadvantage compared to somebody else. So it's really important that if you're providing care or the person that you are looking after is receiving care, you can ask for policies from the local authority in relation to that and just make sure that they're following what they're supposed to be doing, or perhaps they should be giving you what they're meant to and they're not. So maybe their policy says that that they will consider carers for this type of support, but you're not receiving that, so you can complain about that as well. If the person that you provide care for receives a care package, that care package might not be meeting their needs, and the local authority or the NHS might have reduced the hours from that care package, and you can complain about that, especially if the person's circumstances with their health has not changed to warrant any reduction. It might be that you're not happy with the care agency that's involved. Perhaps the carers are not coming on time. Perhaps they're not providing the care that is listed in the care assessment, things like that. Also, with care agencies, you can complain directly to the local authority as well as the care agency themselves too, because they will have their own complaints process. So the complaints process is a remedy available to you. It's one of them, and I'll be talking about the others later on. So when you want to first consider making a complaint, it's really important that you ask the local authority, the agency involved, or the NHS for their policy on that. And that basically outlines what the stages are, the timescales that are involved, who you need to contact, and what you can expect throughout the process. So most complaint policies and processes have a 3-stage process, but I'm seeing more and more now with local authorities that there's just one stage. So you write a letter, they respond, and then you can take it to the Ombudsman. But some local authorities do still have 3 stages, which involves you writing to them basically 3 times. When you want to complain about a decision made, it's really important that you do that as soon as possible, because most policies require that you make the complaint within 6 to 12 months of the date of that decision, or when you became aware of that decision. There are exceptional circumstances, because maybe you have not been able to do that in that time frame. So it's important to also look within the policy for the exceptional circumstances reasons. So some people may need a reasonable adjustment to view the policy or to make the complaint. It might be that you can't use online services, and so you need to make the complaint over the phone. The local authority has a legal duty to make reasonable adjustments for people under the Equality Act. So if you feel that you need a reasonable adjustment made, then explain what this is, what will make it easier for you and more accessible for you. And they should adhere to that. If they don't, then you possibly have grounds for discrimination claims. You can also seek advice on making a complaint, so you know what points to raise and how to raise them. You are, of course, welcome to contact us here at Carers UK on our helpline. Later on in this presentation, I've given the details of how to contact us, and someone will be in touch with you with your query. So once you've gone through the complaints process, the next stage would be the local government and social care ombudsman, and they will investigate complaints of maladministration or service failure which causes injustice. So once you've completed that process with the council and you're still unhappy with their response, you can take it further to the Ombudsman should you wish to. So the Ombudsman would only investigate a complaint once the local authority has had the opportunity to investigate and respond to your initial complaint. So if you're going through the process with the local authority, you can't then contact the Ombudsman at the same time. You have to wait until the complaints process has been finalised and you've got your final response. So maladministration is basically the way the organisation has dealt with a situation or reached a decision. And so it's basically the manner in which the decisions are not made. Service failure, also the Ombudsman can investigate an alleged or apparent failure in the service, which was their function to provide. So an example of that would be they have a duty under the Care Act to provide a carer's assessment. So that's a failure in a service, because that's what they're there to do. And if they haven't done it when you've requested it, then that's a clear failure in a service. So in order for the Ombudsman to investigate your complaint, there has to be some sort of injustice caused to you. They will only investigate complaints where the complainant has suffered serious loss, harm, or distress as a direct result of the fault of the service provider, and that there are continuous and ongoing instances of lower level injustice that remain unresolved for a long period of time. So when you're thinking about complaining, it's really important that you get your dates listed. Like I contacted the social care team on the 12th of July, no response. I chased it on the 21st of July, that sort of thing. Start keeping a diary of when you've contacted them and you've had no responses, or when you've had to constantly chase, because that shows that it's, you're not getting results, but you're not all responses, and it remains unresolved, and that's what the Ombudsman will be looking for. And so the Ombudsman can look at complaints about things such as the care not being good enough, costs and charges that are implemented which you may not agree with, your complaint not actually being looked at properly, having to wait quite a long time for the care for your loved ones, decisions made about what you might need, and not being kept safe. So you might be wondering, what can the Ombudsman actually do? So if the complaint is upheld, the local Ombudsman will ask the local authority to might give you an apology, to provide an explanation of what has gone wrong. They can also make recommendations for changes to prevent the same thing from happening again, and to ask for a review of procedures. So they might be asking the council to amend their policies. They can also offer financial compensation, but it's normally quite lower than what a court can order. So when you contact the Ombudsman, they'll acknowledge your complaints, usually within 5 working days, and they'll inform you throughout the process and whether they're going to investigate usually within 20 working days. So usually they'll come to a decision within 3 months, but some cases can be quite complex, especially if it's gone on for quite a long time. And so they'll need to gather all the evidence and go to the local authority to ask questions. And so they might take a bit longer, but they will keep you updated throughout that process and when you're likely to receive a final response. So there is also the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman. So this is in relation to complaints made to the NHS. So they make final decisions on complaints that haven't been resolved by the NHS in England. They do have wide powers to investigate NHS bodies, health service providers, and independent providers who are under the NHS. So again, similar to the local government ombudsman, they'll look into complaints where someone believes there has been injustice or perhaps hardship because that particular service has not acted properly, or they've given a poor service and not put things right when you've asked them to. They get similar again to the social care ombudsman. They can't consider a complaint until the NHS complaints process has been finalised. So they can also recommend quite similar things to the social care ombudsman. They can ask the organisation to put things right for you or somebody else who's been affected. And so that might mean that they'll acknowledge their mistake, they may apologise, or they may pay back money if you have suffered any monetary loss. And they will ask the organisation to look at the decision again. So legal aid is another remedy available to you. This is legal representation. So if you or the person you provide care for is eligible for legal aid, you can instruct a solicitor or a caseworker to act on your behalf to try and resolve the issues. And I've put this link here in the presentation where you can find providers local to where you live. When it comes to care and support, carers assessments, and direct payments or adaptations under a disabled facilities grant, this area of law is called community care. So all you need to do in that link is type in your postcode and choose community care, and the list of legal providers in your area who have legal aid contracts will come up. If the person who receives care is a child, it will be the parents or parents' finances which are taken into account to assess legal aid eligibility. If you are married and the legal issue is about yourself or your partner, then both your finances are taken into account to assess legal aid. So legal aid is a really useful remedy where there's been quite a clear breach of the law. such as refusing to carry out carer's assessment, failing to provide respite care or sufficient care for the carer. And unlike the complaints process, which can take a couple of months, depending on how complex it is, legal aid can often be a quicker remedy, because you'll have somebody representing you, writing the letters for you, and speaking with the council's legal team to try and resolve the matter. So it might be a quicker remedy than the complaints process. So when you're complaining, it's really important that the points you cover are clear. So your introduction, you can explain the condition that you have or the person that you provide care for has, and explain how that impacts you or them on a daily basis. You can explain the care package or support that is already in place by the service, and address what you want to be making a complaint about. So when you've done the introduction, you're then going into the main body of the complaint. So you can explain each issue in turn, and then challenge what you disagree with in relation to that particular point. So, for example, it might be that you're complaining about a carer's assessment which hasn't taken place yet, but you've been requesting it repeatedly. So you can say that, I've been requesting a carer's assessment for the last year or so, and I disagree with this because I've not had any responses from the local authority. No date has been arranged yet. I've been telling them how I feel, and I'm still being ignored, and explain why you disagree with their actions. You can provide supporting arguments and evidence. So this might be dates of when you've contacted the council, or it might be evidence to show emails or phone logs, just to show that I've been trying consistently, but I've had no responses. Explain how that decision has impacted you or the person that you provide care for. You can provide law and guidance that applies, and how the provider has failed in meeting their duties or powers. And in relation to that particular point, you can contact us at Carers UK, and we can refer you to the relevant parts of the Care Act or other legislation that supports carers. If there is content which you feel is false, then explain what the correct version is, and if again possible, provide evidence to support that, such as witness statements and things like that. Might be a witness statement for yourself to say that this assessment took place on so and so date. The information that's in the carer's assessment is incorrect, and I actually said the following, and I have a witness to support that if somebody else was present. So in your conclusion, you can summarize your complaint and the main points that you have raised. And it's really important that you say what outcome that you want. So it might be that you just want an apology. It might be that you want compensation. If you are asking for compensation, if you have suffered financial loss, then say what that is. And it might be that you want a new assessment, the decision to be looked at again, which might mean that you'll have a review. It might be that you'll have a new social worker, or training for the local authority or particular staff member or NHS, or it might be that you want a change of policy in place. At the end of your complaint, it's important that you say how you can be contacted and confirm when you want to hear from a response in line with what their policy says. So most local authorities have a 20-day turnaround period, but check their policy just to confirm that. And it's usually 20 working days, but each council have different policies in place. So you might be thinking, what evidence can you provide to support your complaint? That could be medical evidence. So I always tell people to visit their GP, consultants or nurses, whoever's your primary health care professional, and get a supporting letter from them. because it really does help support what you're trying to say, especially if it's having an effect on your health as well and your well-being. You can include care and support plans if there is any in place, EHPs, which if in relation to a child or young person is their education, occupational therapist reports, which is in relation to adaptations or equipment. Witness statements or statements, so if you have an advocate in place and they were supporting you throughout whatever process it was, they are technically a witness to what has happened. Evidence from a social care housing file following a subject access request. So subject access request is a request made to a service such as a local authority or NHS for your file. And so when you make that request, it's important to make it as soon as possible because it can take 1 month or more to receive the documents. Expert reports, so it might be that you have occupational therapists involved or independent social workers, and so their reports will help, especially if it's in favour of what you're asking for. Care logs or logs of tasks, setting out details of what care tasks are carried out, the time and the length of time it takes. So this is for mainly for carers who are providing support themselves without anyone else, or perhaps you do have a care agency involved, but you feel that you're doing a bit more and you need some help. So it's important from the morning up until the night, or if you're providing care through the night, you say what time you provided care, what you did, and how long it took you. So it might be that you're providing personal care in the bathroom. So what time did it take? What time did you start trying to transfer the person from the bed or chair to a wheelchair or another form of access? How long did it take you to transfer from the room to the bathroom, etc. Include all of that time. If you are considering legal action through legal aid, then it's really important that you act quickly, because if a decision needs to be challenged through judicial review, which is the legal process to challenge local authorities, it has to be done within 3 months of that particular decision. So solicitors and barristers really need time to consider your case, instruct experts if they need to, and to try and resolve the issue first without it needing to go to court. And that's mainly because if a situation does end up in court, a judge will want to know what's been done before trying to get here. Explain your case clearly, so stick to the point of what you're disputing and try not to discuss too much about the past which is not linked to the actual case, and provide evidence which can help, and be honest about your feelings and what outcome you want to achieve. I can understand that taking legal action can be quite daunting and quite stressful and overwhelming, but it's a remedy available to you. And it's really, especially if you're eligible for legal aid and you're trying to get support as a carer, I would really urge you to consider this so that you can get the help that you need. If you feel quite overwhelmed, then do discuss it with your solicitor or representative, so that they can make any necessary adjustments for you. And having a supportive friend or family member with you at meetings can also help. So advocacy is also something that you might want to consider. Advocate is someone who speaks on behalf of another person, and it may help if an advocate is provided to you during the complaints process, especially if someone needs help to communicate their views, wishes, or feelings. So there are some advocacy organisations that can help with complaints, and it's advisable to ask the social care team or local carer groups for any advocates that can assist. And that's because some advocacy organisations require referrals from the local authority themselves. If you have concerns about the quality of care that is being provided, you can contact the Care Quality Commission, and I've just put their Contact Us page here for you. When you're approaching the Care Quality Commission, it's really important to have the relevant evidence and information available so that that supports your concerns. So that might include email correspondence that you have with the care agency or local authority, CCTV footage if you have that from the care agency or from your own home, statements, medical evidence, and care assessments. So earlier on, I spoke about judicial review, which is another remedy available to you. So it's a procedure by the High Court, which reviews the lawfulness of decisions made by a public body, which is a local authority. It is a remedy of last resort, so it can't be used where there's an alternative remedy. And there are three main grounds, which is I've listed here for you, which is illegality, irrationality, and procedural impropriety. So all of them basically cover where local authorities have either not understood the law correctly, such as they are required under the law to give carers a carer's assessment. So perhaps they've not done that, and so they've not applied the law properly. It might have been that a carer's assessment was carried out, but they've said, no, you don't need any help, you're fine. So that is quite irrational and unreasonable, especially if you have listed how it's affecting you, if you're a carer by yourself and you have no outside support and that sort of thing. So the time limits, like I said earlier, is 3 months from when the claim first arose. So there is support available to you when you want to make complaints. You can contact advice agencies where you may be able to receive free advice and information. So yeah, please do contact us. You're welcome to. We have an email address and a telephone number which you can contact. And so we provide advice on benefits, community care, just general inquiries as well. If you feel that there's been a discrimination element to your complaint, you can contact the Equality Advisory Support Service. For education, there's an organisation called IPSI. For housing matters, Shelter. Mental health and wellbeing, Rethink, and also mental health and wellbeing, Mind. You can get in touch with local carer groups and services. They might be able to help you as well. Your local authority can contact you with a list of local carer groups in your area. Contact advocacy services who might be able to help you with the complaints process. And some advocacy organisations that I'm aware of are Power and Voiceability. But again, they may need a referral from the local authority for you to access that particular service. So this is the example complaint that I've done. So this is in relation to a carer's assessment. So the letter reads, I'm writing to make a formal stage 1 complaint in relation to the authority's decision dated the 14th of August in relation to my carer's assessment, which is also dated the 14th of August. So I've attached documents. So it's really important that if you're providing evidence, you list what they are. Just giving you an example of how you can do that here. So I'm writing to challenge the decision following my carer's assessment to not award me any respite care or support in my role as a carer. And so we're going into the body of the complaint now, where the person is explaining her role. So by way of a background, I have been a carer for my husband for the last 12 years. My husband, Jack, lives with Alzheimer's and is a stroke survivor. He requires 24-hour care. He requires support with all aspects of personal care and cannot be left unattended. So we've given information about her role and who she provides care for, what his needs are, what his condition is. I provide care as well as carers from an agency. The carers from the agency provide 12 hours of care per week, and I cover the rest of the support needed. So now it goes into when the carer's assessment was requested and when it was refused. So I've asked for a carer's assessment in January 2023, but it was refused for no reason. And obviously here she's listed the legislation that carers are entitled to a carer's assessment under Section 10 of the Care Act. So I kept pressing for a carers assessment and was eventually provided with one, having spent many hours calling the social care department, explaining how exhausted I felt and expressing the need for support. So a carers assessment took place on the 31st of July, and the social worker allocated to my assessment spent about 30 minutes asking questions about what support I needed and what my caring role involved. Now, 30 minutes for a care assessment is not sufficient time. It should last about at least 1 hour or more, because the assessment itself is quite long and there's a lot of things to go through. I explained to the social worker in detail what support I needed, what my caring role involves, and that I really needed respite every 2 weeks. But that detail was not noted in the assessment. At no point did the social worker go through the eligibility outcomes, which are outlined in the care and support eligibility criteria regulations. So this is the legislation that supports people that need care as well as carers. And this particular reference to the legislation is what should be covered under a carers assessment and what you should be asking, what the local authority should be asking you. Then goes into the outcome. I was shocked to receive the decision on the 14th of August that I'm not entitled to respite care. I'm further disappointed that the social worker did not carry out a lawful carers assessment. And then it goes into her explaining how the decision has made her feel. So it's made her feel extremely distressed, unheard, and not cared about. She's, they're not acknowledging the support that she needs in her role. And she goes into, I need a break from my caring role. I need to focus on my well-being and get out into the community. And she goes into saying, I don't have any breaks and no help from anybody else. So the outcome that she's asking for is an apology, training for the social worker, and for a new carers assessment to be completed within 2 weeks of the date of the letter that she's written by a new social worker. And she's also asked that this assessment be recorded. And so she just concludes with saying that she should receive an acknowledgement within 2 working days and a full response within 20 working days, as per their own policy. So I do get a lot of people asking me, can I record my assessment? You can if you have authorization to do so. You do need to ask for consent before recording an assessment to the social worker and local authority. Generally, they might say yes, but sometimes they might say no as well. So this complaint does raise a few issues. It first raises concerns about the carer not being provided with enough support. It also shows that the care package that her husband is receiving may not be enough, and perhaps he actually needs a review to have increased hours so that the wife is supported. And so the local authority should ideally be looking into those points as part of a response. So this is just how you can contact us. So if you want to receive advice, then you can email us at advice@carersuk.org. And if it's in relation to community care, myself or one of my other colleagues will respond to you, or you can contact the helpline on that number. If you're on social media and you would like to receive updates, then please do follow us on our channels. And if you are interested in any other online sessions, then the link is here for you.